and I couldn't write another word for a really long time. And that was probably the worst of it. So I know now that when something devastating happens, it's going to impact my ability to write. And I also know it's because I use writing as a method of catharsis, and I tap into some pretty deep emotions, like I think most of us do when we write. And it can be really difficult to write a love story when, you're heartbroken.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kai Carrington-Russell, an Amazon Top 25 best-selling author known for writing kick-butt heroines and delicious men in dark romantic worlds. And if you're new to the channel, then welcome. Here we're dedicated to interviewing fellow authors and professionals within the publishing industry in hopes to offer you insight, resources, and inspiration. And today I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking to a USA Today best-selling author who has over 80 titles published. And if we're going to get technical, over 100 with translations as well, which is mind blowing. We are talking to the one and only Jane Henry. How are you today?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm
I'm
good.
so excited to have you on because we've been circling each other for a couple of years now, and it's so nice to finally meet you in person and hear about all the magic and probably the stress I imagine that happens in the background. So take me back to the start of your writing journey. What made you want to start writing, and how did you find publishing for the first time?
So I'm one of those crazy people that's been writing like as soon as I had a pen in my hand. When I was a kid, I would do, my mom still has like poetry and short stories that I wrote, and it was just kind of always something that I did. And it wasn't until, I got married kind of young, my early 20s, and I had kids, and we have a lot of kids. We have 6 kids altogether. And I didn't write for a long time because we had a lot of kids and it was just really, really busy. I didn't even really read. And then, my kids were getting a little older, and a really good friend of mine, fellow author May Archer, we started our careers at the same time. She said, "Here, just read this. It's like a escapism." And she gave me this romance, and I read it and I loved it. I still remember it was Jen Cruzy's The Bet. And I just adored it. And I was like, I want to do that. I missed writing and I wanted to write. So at the time, NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month in America, was starting. And we just decided that we were going to write a book. And so I started writing back then. I wrote my first novel during National Novel Writing Month, and then I did it the following year and the year after that. And then I just decided I wanted to start writing romance. I just kind of a story a lot of authors tell. I just wanted to write a story that I wanted to read. I really love dark romance and I really love anti-heroes, but I also love really romantic books. So I wanted to write books where, they were really dark and they were scary and they were villains, but also very romantic. So I started writing them.
So, did you start your brand off straight away with dark romance?
No, I started off actually writing BDSM, and there's still like quite a bit of BDS elements in my dark romance, but my books initially weren't dark at all. And I wrote them and I liked them and they were fun, but all I ever read was dark romance. And one time at a writing conference, I was having dinner and there's this big long table of authors. And I was like, what I really want to do is write dark romance. And they were like, well, write it. And I don't know why, but I was scared of writing dark romance. I was really scared of it. And I was like almost crying over it. I was like, I'm so scared. And they were like, for crying out loud, there's nothing to be afraid of. Just do it. And so I did. And that was in 2018. And I started my first dark romance ever was Island Captive. And it was a breakout book for me. All of a sudden, my career basically took off after that book, and I didn't really look back. I've
Yeah.
written a couple of books that are not dark romance since then, but every time I do, I miss the dark romance. So I go back to writing dark.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I do a lot of mafia, and not all mafia is dark, but my mafia is pretty dark in
Yep.
general.
When,
Mhm.
what year did your first book publish?
2016, so 10 years ago this May.
Wow. Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
How do you feel when you say I am almost a decade old author?
Oh my gosh, I feel like a dinosaur in this industry. Like, not a lot of people are still publishing after 10 years, and a lot's changed, and it keeps changing.
A lot has definitely changed. So I started publishing in 2014. So,
Hmm.
and as you
You
said,
know.
definitely changed so much. And it's it's hard to pivot, like constantly pivot, even for those, I think sometimes people and success is different for everybody, and they look at the outside view and they're just like, oh, but that author's fine, they're successful. But it's challenging
Mm.
for everyone when the market changes so much often
Oh,
as well.
absolutely.
Um,
Mm.
I do want, and I find that interesting too. I love that you finally went to your calling of dark romance, and that was where the shift was for you as well.
Mm.
How did you go within those 2 years that you were kind of like, it's doing okay, but it's not where I want it to be? What were some of the conversations you were having with yourself to encourage that this is still the right path for you?
It was kind of interesting. I started publishing thinking, oh, this will be great. I'll, get a little extra grocery money. I had no idea that it would be a career. It was just kind of like this hobby thing, and I had no idea that it would actually, make any money. So I started doing it, and I was pretty happy writing those books for a while. So May Archer and I, we wrote these books, and I still love these books. The Boston Doms was our first series, and we co-wrote them together, and they did really well. So we were kind of surprised with how well received the books were, and it was then that we both started thinking, well, this could actually be like more than just a hobby. This could be something that we actually do full time. We were both homeschooling our kids at the time, and we were stay-at-home moms homeschooling, literally writing like while the kids were napping kind of thing. And I would get up at like 5 in the morning and write because it was the only time I had. So back then it was actually really exciting to me. I was like, wow, this is a whole world that was open to me that I didn't know about. Um, but I just felt like every time I wrote a story, I was holding myself back. Like I wanted them to be like scarier. I wanted more danger. I wanted more trauma because I enjoy getting into that and then, delivering like a hard one happily ever after. So it was kind of like a probably about 6 months where all I would read is dark romance. I didn't read anything but dark romance. I would read it and read it and read it and then say, oh, now I'm going to write my, contemporary. And then like I said, I had this conversation with authors, but then I realized that I could do it. I think I was afraid to do it because I didn't really think that I could write it as well as I wanted to, you know? So it was more of just kind of me getting comfortable with the genre and then pushing through it, but at the same time, all these opportunities coming and then just realizing that, publishing was easier than I thought, you know? I could do it.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about dark romance actually, because I can relate to this. So I personally wasn't too sure about the dark romance genre as well. And there were two
Mm.
factors that played into this. When my co-author T.L. Smith came and said, "Do you want to write a dark romance book together?" I was like, "Well, I don't know." I'm like, am
Mhm.
I too vanilla for this? Like, what does it involve? And I wasn't reading it at the time. And so I read it and I was like, I was clutching my pearls. I was like, oh my goodness, it's gonna get dark really fast. But also I was intrigued by it and I wanted to stretch myself as a writer as well. But there was also the thought process of how will this be received by readers? Because it can put you in a edgier light, perhaps, and that scared me a bit as well. But obviously, for both of us, it's been well received because there is an audience and there is a market that loves that. But I'm wondering if that was part of the reason why you were hesitant as well, because it can be scary to put yourself out there in a genre that you're not familiar with, but also isn't for
Mm.
everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And I had some readers that, stopped reading me. And I had been working so hard at building a brand and building a newsletter and having followers online. And then for me to say, guess what? Now I'm writing this dark romance. Fortunately, at the time, a lot of writers that were doing more BDSM books also started doing dark romance. So we kind of broke in a lot of readers at the same time. But I was definitely afraid of how well received it would be. At the time, it wasn't something I was relying on to like pay my mortgage, so I wasn't so afraid of that so much, where I would be these days of changing genres. Back then, that really wasn't what I was concerned about. I think there was definitely also a part of me that at the time was concerned about elevating bad things, or how do I say this? Painting morally gray or even like flat out bad men in a good light. Like I had some concerns about that. Like, was it ethical, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and now I see it very differently. Now that I've written so many, I'm one of those people that I don't really understand what the story is until I'm actually in it writing it, and that's when I understand what it's about. So I really had to write it before I understood that, people in dark romances, even the morally gray or the gray and the black that make decisions that aren't necessarily right, aren't really very different from the rest of us. All of us make decisions that maybe others won't agree with, but for me, I found it so much more rewarding to see them get there happily ever after and to see that redemption process. And there's also a part that just, as a woman, longs for that hero that will do anything for you. And I remember talking to my sister-in-law about this because she was married to my brother, who's now deceased, and we were talking about how much she liked, like, he was a tough guy. He was this real blue collar, really tough guy, tough as nails. And I remember her telling me, but I'm always attracted to that kind of guy, that really kind of an asshole. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that, but that's what she said, and he would have agreed. And I was like, of course you are, because if a zombie apocalypse comes, he's getting your family fed, like, period. That's happening, and that's part of the appeal of these men. They will stop at nothing to take care of these women, even if it means breaking the law or murdering somebody, because it's fictional. And in this realm, we get to explore the extremes of what really being devoted is. And to me, that's what the appeal is. And that's what I love about these books now. But it took me a while to get there.
I would completely agree with this. And I think as well there is an element like it's interesting to hear how you perceive it, because I feel very much the same with that. And I also think
Mhm.
it's the crossover and the curiosity of the criminal mind as well. And they're not always
Mhm.
necessarily criminals, but I mean, how many of us watch documentaries on serial killers? Like, and it's
Mhm.
interesting to see have an insight perhaps on how differently they think. And it's absolutely that devotion that we love in romance. So stop it.
Mhm.
You're making me fall in love with dark romance all over again.
Mhm.
Tell me then about your writing process. You said before you don't really know what the book is about until you're in it. So, what does that look like from you when you start to when you finish? And how long does it usually take you to finish writing a book?
I'm firmly in planter category. I like to think I plot, and I do not stick to my plot ever. And now, after 10 years in and 80 books written, I've accepted that this is my process. I'm not going to change my process. So I always start with a rough outline. For me personally, I need to know how the story ends. Even when I read books, I'm that, like, terrible person that reads the ending because for me, somehow I need to know that. And as a writer, I definitely need to know how it ends before I start writing. So I want to figure out what the themes are going to be, what I want to explore in this particular book. But I write character-driven books. I've always written character-driven books. Personally, that's what I like to read, so it's what I like to write. So for me, I spend a long time developing characters. And by long time, I mean a couple weeks or a couple months of developing a character before I write the book. I spend a lot more time on the characters than I do the plot per se. Because once I have the plot, then I know how to fill it in. But I spend a lot of time developing the characters because for me personally, it's way more rewarding if the characters have, like, an emotional wound that they overcome. And one of the craft books I read years ago, and I'm really bad at remembering names, so I forget which one it was. But the question was, what lie does your character believe about themselves? So every time before I write a book, I ask myself, what is the lie that this character believes? What is the lie that this character believes? I'm not worthy of love. Love makes people weak, whatever it is. Monogamy, if it's a man who's a man whore or whatever, monogamy is for the weak, whatever the lie is. Sometimes the lies are, I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of a happily ever after. I'm irredeemable. And those are the lies that I want to prove wrong in the course of the book. So I always start out with that. I have a lot of world building. So I actually have Scrivener that I use for writing, but I designed a whole template in Scrivener that's just for my book Bibles. So I have all these folders, I have maps, I have major details about my series, which is why it takes me a couple months to plot a series before I start. So I spend a lot of time on the details of it. And then once I have the story going, I'm ready to write. And I always feel like the first 25% of the book is me trying to find the character's voice. And once I get 25 to 30% in, then I'm into the story. And for me, I have to get into character. So I dictate my first draft. I'm writing Irish right now. I literally have to dictate in an Irish accent. I can't write them unless I have like an Irish accent. And all my friends are like, we need to see. I'm like, I will never show anybody me dictating with this Irish accent because they're terrible Irish accents. But it's the only way that I get into character. So, I'll dictate, I'll cry through a scene, I'll get angry through a scene. My sister used to transcribe them for me, and she would say, well, you really get into this. Because, if it's a fight scene, I'll raise my voice. Like, I just really have to get into it. So that's my kind of my process when it comes to, plotting and then writing. And then I have a lot of little rituals. So this is my office here, which you can't really see much here, but I have like a deck of affirmation cards. I pull an affirmation card before I start, and I put that on my desk. I have my kettle, and I put a cup of tea on before I go. I have a CBD candle that I light, and I put that in the background, and it just gets me in the zone. It gets me in the mood. My office is very calming, it has lavender walls, and everything's like soft pastels. And actually put white Christmas lights up around my desk and just decided to keep them. So I have like little white fairy lights. It just, to me, I'm a very much of like a mood writer. So if it's a calming atmosphere, then I get into the story. So that's pretty much it. And then I'm a fast drafter, so it probably takes me 4 to 6 weeks to draft it, and then I spend as much time editing, if not more, than I do drafting because I write really fast. So I have a lot to clean up
Yeah.
after.
There are so many things I want to go off on here. First,
Mhm.
environmental, I think, isn't very important. Not for everybody necessarily, but I
Mhm.
agree with you having the right mood, having your space clean or whatever it needs to be to spark joy and inspiration for you, especially if you're doing this. You want to make it as comfortable as possible because sometimes sitting down in the chair to write can be an obstacle in itself, depending on what type of day that you're
Definitely.
having. I really
Mhm.
envy those who can just pull out a laptop and work anywhere. I think it's a skill in itself. The dictation part, when do
Mhm.
you start applying that? Because when you've been doing this for a long time, especially with the amount of titles that you have, I don't know if you have experienced wear and tear on the body. And I am
Mhm.
trying to highlight that conversation here on the channel to prevent it perhaps for newer authors or if authors are starting to notice certain things. So I know for myself personally, this year I will be looking into dictation because I'm having issues with my fingers and my wrists. And considering how many
Mhm.
words we can often type, that's becoming a real health issue for me.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if you had a similar experience or if dictation was just a natural sort of easier thing for you to dive into and there wasn't any ailments. What's your process around that?
Yes, I definitely have. I personally believe, and this is an unpopular opinion, but I will state this for the sake of authors everywhere because I love my fellow authors. I think everyone needs to learn dictation. I think every author cannot afford not to have dictation in their toolkit. And people will say to me all the time, I can't dictate, I can't do it. Well, it's unfortunately comes naturally to almost nobody. It's something that you have to teach yourself to do, and it's a skill that you need to train yourself to do. There are books and YouTube videos, and I'm happy to like send you some resources that I've used personally. I have had injuries with carpal tunnel. I've had injuries with fingers. I used to have issues where I would have really bad eczema. I have a lot of food sensitivities, and I would react with eczema, but I mean, it was painful to type. It was very painful to type. And I had to learn how to give my hands a break. I write a lot of words like all of us do, and dictation was one way to do that. I also had a baby. She's 3 years old now, but it was so much easier to be able to hold her or nurse her and sit there and dictate a little bit. I used to only dictate a little bit at a time, and it was frustrating to me because it would take me a long time to go back and revise it. Um, and it doesn't necessarily save time. Like a lot of people think it saves time, but when you factor in the revision process, for most of us, we find that it doesn't save that much time, but it does save the wear and the tear on the body. So it's definitely something that I think everyone should do because someone's going to have a broken hand. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to have carpal tunnel. You're going to be in a place where, like it could happen. So I think it's just a really good tool for us to be able to use. And if you start it and you're like, I'm terrible at this and I hate this, it's not a reason to stop. So that's like the bad news, you know. Um, Not everybody likes to dictate, but then once you get into dictating, the great thing about it is that it's so fast to get the story arc out there. And with my personal process, I need the story arc out there. So if I spend a longer time, like if some of my friends will sit and they'll write a chapter and they'll rewrite the chapter and rewrite the chapter. For me, that slows down the story arc and then I lose it. So I need the story arc to flow, and dictation does that for me. So I can sit and dictate, 3,000 words in 30 minutes. And it sounds like a lot. It will take me maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours to edit that, which is still, pretty good productivity. But if I look at that and then I'm like, no, I actually don't really like that scene. I want to go back and redo it. It's only 30 minutes of my time, so I can go back and redo it. I will sometimes use it as like an outline and say, make sure that they go into the club at this scene, or maybe this is the type of dialogue. So I use it like for brainstorming. I'm high activator with the write better, faster strengths for writers, and activators want to tell the story. So for me, it really soothes that need to tell the story. So hopefully that answers your question.
It absolutely does, and thank you for being so open about that. I definitely will ask you to send over the resources that you do have, and I'll pop them in below
For
for those
sure.
who are wanting to dive into that. We can dive into that together in 2026. And what you just mentioned there as well was the Gallup strengths. So when
Mhm.
Jane was talking about the number one activator, there is a resource called Gallup. So
Mhm.
basically, you take a test and it'll tell you basically what your top strengths are. It is quite common amongst authors. Well, I mean, to be fair, everywhere in most industries, but quite common amongst the industry because then we know what our strengths are and we can focus on that instead of comparing with other authors and saying, I'm not like this author, et cetera, et cetera. And that can also be facilitated through Becca Syme's course, who is a fantastic resource that I would highly recommend on here as well.
Definitely. Mhm.
While we're on the topic of health, I want to talk about the big nasty burnout. I would
Mm,
love to know if you've ever experienced it. I will be surprised if you haven't after publishing over 80 titles within 10 years. And I
mhm.
would like to know what you now do to ensure that it doesn't happen again, if it has happened, because it can be quite difficult to bounce back from that. And it usually takes a lot longer than we realize.
Definitely. So going back to the Gallup, the Clifton Strengths, I am a number one achiever, and that that impacts this conversation because I have a Clifton Strengths coach. I work with a coach through Terry at Write Better Faster, and he says that burnout looks different for an achiever than it might for other people. So people that have different strengths they might hit burnout and they may not be able to write for 6 months or a year or longer. For an achiever, it basically means that we slow down. Like we don't really burn out, like fizzle to the ground. Um, However, we have to be really aware of what triggers burnout for achievers and counteract that because it's devastating to an achiever to not be producing. Like it's a major hit to our like self-esteem and our emotions. So I've realized that my most difficult block for writing is and what is going to have me hitting burnout the quickest is emotional depletion. So when I like the first time I ever hit burnout, and it was hardcore burnout where I could not write for a long period of time, was the sudden loss of my dad about 12 years ago. He was killed in a car accident. I was writing a book when he died, and I couldn't write another word for a really long time. Um, and that was probably the worst of it. So I know now that when something devastating happens, it's going to impact my ability to write. And I also know it's because I use writing as a method of catharsis and I tap into some pretty deep emotions, like I think most of us do when we write. And it can be really difficult to write a love story when, you're heartbroken. And in the course of my 10-year writing career, not to get too sad or down or whatever, I've had some pretty devastating things happen. I lost my brother to cancer 2 years ago this February, and it was a sudden loss, and he was my younger brother. And then my husband, Michael, who works full time with me in this industry, had cancer, and I almost lost him to cancer. And he was in a coma for a long period of time, and his recovery was a couple of years, and it was pretty brutal. So I know now that those are the times when it's going to be the most difficult to write. So what I did was I asked for help. So this is when I became a big proponent of coaching through writing. I meet with my coach through Write Better Faster every month, and I haven't stopped meeting with him every single month. And sometimes it's like, hey, how was your Christmas? It was nothing big. And then I will never forget the conversation I had in a parking lot at Panera Bread. I was a full-time author. My family depends on my income because my husband works full time with me. And we had buried my brother the week before. And it was one of those classically really terrible situations where the family kind of turned on each other and there was a lot of bickering. It was terrible. It was a terrible situation. And I remember just calling my coach and saying, how do I write this book? I have a deadline. I have pre-orders. My pre-order is going to get canceled. I have to do this. And he talked me through it. And he gave me the advice that got me through it. So for me, and I don't mean to, sorry to turn this, it's a little different from being burnt out, but also I guess if we're all in this for the long term, I mean, things happen. People die, people get sick, and devastating things happen. Even in America right now, a lot of writers are finding it difficult to write because of the political climate. It's a difficult time for a lot of people. And I had to find the tools to get through that. For me, it was coaching. Coaching carried me through that. I'm a big proponent of therapy. I'm also a big proponent of exercise. People say all the time, I don't have time to get to the gym. And I always say, I don't have time not to go because if I don't get to the gym, my head's not clear and I can't write. I'm not going to write well if I'm not, constantly moving and just getting those good, that feel good hormones. Is that right? I don't know. I'm perimenopausal, so all I talk about is hormones. So I don't, it's hormones, just plain hormones. Um, so that's definitely something that I recommend that you have to find the way that's going to get you through those. It's kind of non-negotiable if this is something that you're going to do. And also, if you find writing to be cathartic, you have to write. You have to do it. For me, I have 6 kids, 2 dogs, and a turtle. So I do not write in my house. I have to come and write in an office. So it's crucial to find that space and that quiet to do it. If it means noise canceling headphones and an office outside the home, and I've had a couple of different offices outside the home, that's really important for me to have that space because there's nothing that's going to push a writer closer to burnout than trying to write in an environment that's going to take you out of the good part of it, right? So if you're trying to write a story and you can't get in that state of flow and you can't find your characters' voices and you're constantly having to answer your kids' questions or the phones ring or whatever, it's going to be a very difficult place to write. So for me, I need to have that quiet space. And also I think it's super important to prevent burnout to really feed the well. And it's Becca's always talking about this, Becca Syme. It's really important to know what that is. So for me, it's exercise, it's meditation, yoga. I need to be able to veg on my couch and just watch a TV show for a couple weeks sometimes between releases. Like I really need to do that. I need to travel. Like these are things that really feed my well. But then on the flip side, it's really important for me to also acknowledge what doesn't feed my well. So for me personally, for example, social media is very depleting. It's very depleting. I dislike it. I love the connection, but I don't like being, inundated by a lot of like emotional things at once. So I have to severely limit my time on social media. And if I'm on social media and I'm doom scrolling, it's going to have a direct impact on my ability to write. So I guess I'm kind of going all over the place, but that's my plan for long-term writing.
First of all, I want to say thank you for sharing that with us as well. And I think it's amazing. But I love all of the nuggets that are in this as well for those who are listening, because the one thing that I will add on that, which really mirrors what you said, is you need mental fortitude for this to be a long-term career. And everything that you've discussed, it's quite interesting. I feel like you and I are actually very similar in our process. I'm number one achiever as well. I understand everything you were saying, I hear you. And I think the best part about this career is figuring out who you are as an individual. We always talk about figure out your brand, or, what's your writing style or things like that. And I really think part of the reason, obviously, our writing matures and we get a bit of a better understanding of the industry itself. But I think as we go through, we get a better understanding of ourselves and what we're actually advocating, or what kind of emotions we're trying to put into each story. And we need to be able to learn all of those things, as you said, what fills you well, what does not fill you well. All of these are very, very important. And a lot of people, I mean, I made the mistake, and I'm sure like you did and many other people, is that you just keep pushing, 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 and then you fall off that cliff, unfortunately, and then you pick yourself up and you begin to learn these lessons. I think coaching is a phenomenal tool as well. And yeah, I think there's amazing things to take out of that. So thank you so much for sharing.
Of
I
course,
love I
thank
love
you.
that you're a little bit hippie too. I think we're both hippies, so I'm just like I live for this.
Yeah, I kind of like hide how hippie I am sometimes.
I'm the same. If somebody checked and they'd see all these crystals, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm woo woo.
I'm very woo-woo. I'm very woo-woo.
I
You
love
know, it is what it is.
Absolutely love it. What was the most surprising thing you found in this industry that you weren't expecting? Was there something that really caught you off guard in your career?
Definitely. I was a reader. I studied English in college and I was an English teacher for a while. And for me, reading was such a solitary type of thing to do. And I was really taken by surprise with how community has developed around it. So, here we are in 2026, and now, I have a street team who are some of my best friends in the industry. I have really good friends that I go and retreat with, and we talk to each other, and, we support each other. I have book bloggers and bookstagrammers and book talkers that I'm, friends with, and we love, I relate to them as a reader because I love romance. And yes, I'm a writer, and it's a little different sometimes because I create these worlds, but I also read in these books, and I love sharing the excitement and, the memes and supporting each other. And so the sense of community in the romance world took me by surprise because I didn't know it was there. Like I said, it was always just such a solitary thing, and it really isn't anymore in 2026. It can be, but it also doesn't always have to be. It's become a hobby that we share now. So that surprised me. And in the publishing world, it surprised me that I could support my family doing this. That shocked me. I never thought I'd be able to. Um, in 2020, I retired my husband from his job, and he's been working full time with me ever since. And the two of us, provide for a family of eight with these books and this career. And I never thought that would be possible. And honestly, it sounds way over the top, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I could pinch myself every day, waking up, doing this with my best friend and supporting this family and having this flexibility that I have to be present with my kids. And, you know, I have one daughter who had some mental health issues last year, and she wrote an essay for school, and she asked me to read it. And in it, she said something like it was about overcoming challenges. And she was talking about some of the challenges that she's overcome with mental health. And in her essay, she wrote, "And I'm so thankful my mom is an author and she has the time to be with me when I need her. And she's not always in an office. She can come home, she can pick me up, and we get to do things together." And it just, it meant a lot to me. So that was surprising and something that I will never take for granted. So.
I think that's the enlightening part about it as well, is there is a lifestyle that it can create too. That's not to disengage how much hard work and how many hours go in because it is very hard to switch off, I think, for a lot of authors in this. So mentally
For
prepare
sure.
yourself. But I love that as well. I feel like it's moments like that that you can really just sit with it because I think we're so go, go, go all the time, especially when you're rapid releasing as well. And it can
Mm,
be difficult sometimes to really celebrate the wins or just remind yourself as to where you are and how you got there as well. And I am so glad that you had that moment. It's really nice.
thank you. Thank you.
What
And I agree. It's a lot of work. It's been 10 years to get to this point. But
um,
yeah,
and
and
you
it's still a
probably
lot of work.
yeah, I was going to say you're probably still doing crazy amounts of hours.
Yeah.
I do want to mention as well with bringing hubby on board, who I've met and is absolutely amazing. You guys are a power team.
Thank you.
And he is a guru when it comes to, sort of the marketing aspect and things like that. So I did want to pick your brain and thoughts on
Mhm.
what are the top three must-dos that you put in place before having a release that you would suggest to any author listening? Maybe make sure you have these things in place. It might work for you as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I will say, after doing this for 10 years and having so many releases, it's so important for us authors to remember that we can't do everything. And I think that that's a big temptation for us. You know, I said to a friend last year, and she was like, "Can you repeat that?" And she's a very successful author. And, like all of us, we had just gone to a conference and someone was doing a talk on TikTok and someone else was doing special editions and someone else had a Kickstarter. And I said to her, as a successful author, she's, top of her genre, I said, you have no choice but to leave some things on the table. You have to leave some things on the table. We can't do everything. The most successful people choose the most important things to do. And what's most important to me isn't necessarily the most important for someone else. I think for me personally, with a launch, it has to be part of what's going to give me the greatest bang for my buck, right? Or what's going to give me the most um, visibility because it's such a competitive market. And the other one is, what do I enjoy? So I have to have some joy in the process or we're going to hit burnout, right? So for me, um, I always schedule posts to social media, but I have like a social media manager that does this. And we do like a content poll. We go over that. She does the posts. So that would be the number one thing that I would do. The second thing I would do is a newsletter. I spent a long time cultivating a newsletter, and I have a very supportive newsletter. So the second thing would be newsletter. Um, and the third would be some form of advertising. And I say some form because everybody's going to have a different form that works for them. So my husband, Michael's excellent at Facebook ads, so he does Facebook ads. We dabble a little bit in Amazon ads. We're not so successful with those. I've tried TikTok. I'm not that good at TikTok, So other people might say TikTok is the way to go or Amazon ads are the way to go. For me, I schedule on social media, I send to my newsletter, and then I advertise. But I think the most important thing in any launch is consistency. So my readers know they're going to get a cover reveal. They're going to see the blurb. I will tell them what the tropes are. If they follow me on socials, they're going to get a teaser of what's coming. They know exactly what the book is because for me personally, and I tell this to a lot of new authors that are coming into this industry, the most important thing in effective marketing is not selling a lot. The most important thing is finding the reader that wants your book. Because I don't want to sell 100,000 copies of a book to people that don't want my book. I would rather sell 1,000 copies to people that are going to want to come back and read more and enjoy my book. Like I have all respect to clean romance, but you're not going to like my book, so please don't spend your money on that. Buy something else. So I think it's very important in all marketing to find the people that really want to read your book. So I put it all out there. I tell everybody what the trigger warnings are. I tell them exactly what to expect in the book. I tell them what the tropes are. If there's something that I have in my book that may be controversial, like I have a Christmas novella that came out in November, and it's a stepbrother romance. And I must have said stepbrother romance 100 times in my posts because I don't want someone that's going to be triggered with a step sibling romance to be triggered by my step sibling romance. I want people that are going to be into that. So that's kind of my go-to is just, don't have any shame about what you wrote, If you have a menage, femdom, whatever, you just don't put a cowboy cover on it and hope that you're going to sell the book. You want to find the people that want your femdom menage. So that's kind of my little marketing talk.
I am curious outside of the regular, so, Kindle and paperback, what has been the best third platform, or say when it comes to translations or audiobooks or something of
Mhm.
special editions, artworks, what has been the bigger game changer for you that you found great success with?
Kind of a twofold answer. I would definitely say translations, but keep in mind that this is coming from somebody who has a really big platform. So when I think my books are in 4 or 5 different languages now. The volume of books that are out there is large, So it's a great income source for me. I remember 1 year, it was right after I had my baby, and I wasn't really doing a lot of marketing with my books in America. I was kind of releasing them, but a lot had changed and I had been pregnant, so I didn't really know and I didn't kind of really follow the trends. And I think my income was like 65% of my income that year was from foreign translations. So it was like a significant amount of money. Um, a significant amount of my income came from, outside the US. That said, it can be very expensive to do that. So if I were a newer author and I didn't necessarily have the capital to invest, because you do have to invest like a significant amount of money to get the translations done if you're publishing them independently, I would say audio would be the next one. I have been doing audio since my first books hit the market, and I now have so many books in audio that you know, a it's become a major hit to my bottom line, is to have that very steady audio income. And the great thing about audio is that it doesn't have the algorithm that ebooks do. So when you publish a book on audio, people will continue to read them. Even after, years after you've released the book, people will still, because they'll look, and I'm an audio reader myself. And if they like the narrator, they'll buy the book. If they like the first in the series, they'll buy the whole one. If they look at their Audible account like I do and realize I have 10 credits, I'll just buy a bunch. So people do this all the time, So audiobook is a huge market. And so if I were looking for a way to expand or to have like another income stream, I would go audio first because the barrier to entry is much smaller. Um, you could do a shared audio. I did a couple shared audios. You could sell your audio to a third party that would produce them. I've done that for a bunch of my audios. So yeah, both translations and audios are just excellent sources of income. So, of
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. I really appreciate it. I
course.
would like to talk about Wicked Altar. Comes out on the 30th of January, so it is the
Mhm.
new release. What can
Yes.
you tell us about it? And was there anything different about writing this book? Any new weird processes you had to put in place, or how did you feel writing it?
This one, I am so excited about this book. It is of all the books I've written, hands down my favorite book that I've ever written. And I've definitely said that before, but now this is coming out, so I can say it again. It is absolutely my favorite book. It's also the longest book I've ever written. It clocked in at 105,000 words, which is a long book for me. I don't usually write, I've never written a book over 100,000 words, so it's a good doorstopper. And what I love about this book, what's different about it, the heroine is actually autistic, and I have never written a neurodivergent heroine before, and I really wanted to. I saw this clip a year or two ago, and it was some kind of like reality TV, and there was a guy and there was a girl, and they weren't even like romantically involved. They were just friends, but she was autistic, and she had this meltdown. And leading up to this scene, she had said, when I'm having a meltdown, this is what helps me. And he saw her having a meltdown and he just like, he crossed a bridge. It was like some kind of survive or something. He like crossed a bridge and he came to her and he like put his hands on her face and he just held her and he talked her down. And she went from full on meltdown to like calm, and he was like affirming. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, what beautiful love that is. And again, they weren't, I think he was married, like they weren't romantically attached, but I was like, what if they were? You know, what if they were? And that's kind of how the writer brain works sometimes. So that was kind of a seed that was in the back of my mind. My oldest son is autistic. So neurodivergence is extremely important to me, and representation in romance is super important to me. So there are people in my life who I love very deeply that are neurodivergent. So it mattered to me to have a neurodivergent character. So I wrote a neurodivergent hero last year, with Unveiled in the Wicked Vows series, and it was great. It was a challenge, and I really was very happy with how it played out, especially when, he was falling in love with her, and he would say, like, is this okay for me to say this? Or how do you want me to respond? Like, he was trying to find ways to like meet her need. Writing a heroine was a completely different experience. It was a big challenge for me to do. It was a real big challenge because I wanted to accurately represent the challenges that she faced, but also not just shine a spotlight. I didn't want this token neurodivergent character. I wanted her to be real. I wanted her to be relatable, and I wanted the representation to be authentic and well thought out. So I took a lot of time researching that and coming up with the ideas of how I wanted that to play out. And then I also thought to myself, what if I gave them like a bully backstory? What if he was her high school bully? What if she was this odd girl in school and she was the goody two-shoes? So in my mind, this was a Draco Hermione type of combination. This was evil Draco, who everybody hated, and goody two-shoes Hermione Granger. And what happened if they would have to get married, right? So, and I was just talking, my social media manager is actually reading the book now, and she was like, "Oh, you pulled it off. You absolutely pulled it." And I was like, "Yay." So, enemies to lovers to me, frequently when I write it, it's kind of one-sided. She hates him because he did this. He hates her because she did this. They both absolutely despise each other in this book, until like a good way through it. So I loved that kind of play. But also, she decides to marry him to save her younger sister, which is kind of a complicated story. She has a terminal illness, and his family is the only one that's able to get her the help that she needs. So this formerly bullied autistic woman that doesn't want to get close to anyone outside of her immediate family is forced to marry her enemy. And it worked. It took a long time to write, a long time to plot. I used a lot of like beta reading and multiple editors, and it worked, but I'm very proud of how it came out. So that's Wicked Altar.
I am one clicking that. That sounds amazing. Wow.
Thank
Well, and
you.
many, many layers to it as well. I can understand why it was very like complicated to write, but I'm very excited to read that. Thank you for
Mhm.
sharing. I'll put the links below.
Thank you.
Um,
Yes, thank you.
what is an end note or a message you would like to provide for authors? It's 2026, it's a new year.
Mhm.
What advice do you have for them?
I love this question. And it's funny, we were talking earlier about being in this industry for a long time, and I kind of feel like a dinosaur. So I actually do have, newer authors coming and asking me this question in person, or, on a message, like a group on Facebook or something. Um, if I can give anybody one piece of advice, I was thinking about this at the gym actually, because in January, you go to the gym and there are so many people at the gym in January, right? Like, good luck finding a treadmill. And every once in a while, I want to go to get some weights or whatever. And this newbie who I've never seen them before, will say, like, I'm sorry, were you trying to do this? And I always want to say, take up the space. You belong here every bit as much as I do. And I feel the very same way about the writing and publishing industry. You know, every single writer, no matter how famous, how well known, how prolific they are, started at the beginning before they had written a book. And every author deserves to take up space. They deserve to be here. There's no gatekeeping in this industry. And I really want that message to get out because I really feel like if it doesn't, there might be some beautiful books that we'll never get to read. So I think you should take up space. You belong here. That's my message.
That's a beautiful message. Thank you. I'm like, oh, that's such a nice message to start 2026 off. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming on today. And most importantly, where do we find you? Where do we stalk you? Where do we follow you? Where do we do all the things? And for everyone who is watching, don't forget Wicked Altar comes out on the 30th of January. So definitely one click that bad boy.
Thank you. Please do because I love this book. I am so excited to publish this book. Um, And I really do think that when people read it, they're going to love it. So thank you for that. Um, I'm on Instagram, Jane Henry under Instagram. I'm on Facebook, although I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook. I do have a reader group on Facebook that's pretty active and I post everything in there. JaneHenryRomance.com is my website, where I have all the news coming. And let's see, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, JaneHenryRomance.com. Those are the places to find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on today. And I just absolutely know that this is going to offer so much insight and so many great resources as well. So thank you for sharing those.
Thank
And yeah,
you.
watch this space. We might even get you on in a couple of years and see where you're at again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I will talk to you soon. Until then, guys, we will see you next episode. Thank you for joining us. Bye.